All right, apparently I'm live. Here we go. So I guess I'll wait a few minutes and see if some people join in. This is a Facebook live chat. It is my first Facebook live chat, so please bear with me. I am told if you have any questions at all that you can type them in and I'll be able to see them and respond to them. But my name is Mirella Amato, and I have been asked to come in and talk about the Cicerone Certification Program. And the Cicerone Certification Program is a program that certifies people in the selection, storage, and service of beer. So an easy parallel is something like a sommelier, but in the world of beer. So I have to say I've been delighted in the past few years to see that there is really an increase in interest from the cocktail community with regards to both beer, which is the exciting part, and this program. And before I dive in and introduce myself, I did want, in the interest of full disclosure, to let everyone know that I did work for the Cicerone Certification Program for 2 years. I was their Canadian coordinator. This being said, I lobbied pretty heavily for that job. So the reason I had that job is because I really believed that the Cicerone Certification Program was a great initiative and I wanted to bring it to Canada, which I did. So I did that for 2 years, no longer doing that, but was so glad to have the opportunity then to spread the word and glad to have the opportunity again now. So before we dive in, I see there's already quite a few people joining in. That's exciting, but I'll just introduce myself and then I'll talk about the program a little bit, and as well as my journey getting to the Master Cicerone level, and of course some resources. I've brought some books that I'm going to show you. So I started working in the beer industry 10 years ago. I have a company called Beerology, which you can find at beerology.ca, because I'm Canadian living in Toronto. I also wrote a book, which I will show you later. It's fantastic, on a side note. And so when I founded Beerology, all I really knew was that I wanted to spread the word about beer. At the time, we're talking about 2008, you know, craft beer was really a niche thing. You know, I was really into it, but, you know, just like stamp collecting or the opera, you know, there were those of us who were hardcore, and then a lot of people who just didn't realize it existed. And it always haunted me that people would buy the same beer by the pitcher over and over again, when really there is, you know, a beer for every mood, every food, and every occasion. And so my goal was to help people shift the way that they look at beer. And, you know, in the same way as we won't choose the same wine when we're having a steak as we would when toasting New Year's. And of course, with cocktails, I'll change what I'm drinking based on my mood. I am omnibibulous. I drink cocktails as well. You know, the beer should be approached very much in the same way. So I started out at the time offering guided tastings, and then as I studied beer and learned more and more, I moved into staff training and consulting, and just kept studying and growing the business. And the sort of niche that I have come to with my work is flavors. How to describe them, really understanding where they come from a process and ingredient and chemical perspective, biochemical, physical, as I'm sure you all know. There's a lot of science involved in beverages. And how to play with them, food pairing, of course, beer cocktails, which I'm having tons of fun with. And I do have recipes that I post regularly on my website, so feel free to have a gander and critique. I would love to hear what you guys think of it, but the more time I spend in the cocktail community and picking bartenders' brains, I think the more I'm fine-tuning my beer cocktails. So really, flavors, where they come from, and how to bring them out, you know, proper serving temperature, glassware. So we're squarely in, you know, the beer sommelier / Cicerone realm here. So that being said, when I started Beerology, the Cicerone Certification Program wasn't really around. I believe it was founded in 2007, and I distinctly remember, because when I started with Beerology, I was talking to a number of brewers and trying to understand where I fit in, and this brewer sent me an email and said, we just got this note from this Cicerone thing, and it sounds like exactly what you want to do. So I looked it up, and I sort of sat back for a little while, a few years, to see how it was developing. And once I saw that it was picking up steam, I went down in 2010 and wrote my certified Cicerone exam, which is level 2. I'll talk about that a little more later. And then in 2012, I took my master Cicerone. So I was the 5th person ever to pass that exam. And I am now one of 13 Master Cicerones in the world. And for those of you who are wondering, that's a 14-hour exam about beer. I'm going to let that sink in. So I see we have a good group now, so I'll dive in with the Cicerone Certification Program. Really what I want to do is break down the 4 levels for you. Talk a little bit about which jobs they're geared towards and who should be looking at those levels. Then I'll share different resources that you can use to study towards those levels. And at the end, I wanted to provide on a more personal note, my thoughts on, whether or not this particular series of certifications might be right for you and how to make that determination, or for your staff. So the first biggest misconception that I have to address right away is that the Cicerone Certification Program is not a school. They don't offer courses. I still have a lot of people, because I was the coordinator for 2 years, a lot of people contact me about the Cicerone Certification Program, and they ask, where can I take it? And it's not a course that you can take. It is a series of exams. So it's really designed to assess your level of expertise. So there are syllabi online, syllabi being the plural of syllabus. So there's a syllabus for each level, and you can use that as a checklist. It'll basically outline all of the things that you need to master in order to pass that exam. But beyond that, the Cicerone Certification Program allows you to study in whichever way you see fit. So obviously there's positives to that, and there's negatives. On the negative side, of course, if you're starting from scratch, it can be a little bit daunting to dive in and start studying and finding those resources, although there are more and more resources accumulating online. On the plus side, though, and this is, in my opinion, really why the program was conceived, and the best approach for the program, is that if you already know beer, or you've worked in beer for a number of years, you can just go in and take the exam. You don't have to pay to take a class just because you have to take the class to get to the exam, and you're paying for a bunch of instruction that you might not necessarily need. So the other thing I just wanted to mention up front in terms of the levels is that level 1 and 2 really can be studied for. So there are a number of resources which I'll outline for you, and if you read all these books and you taste a lot of different beers, you'll probably manage to get through level 1 and level 2 just fine. Once you get to level 3 and 4, though, it requires a certain level of experience, because the program, as I mentioned, is really geared to, or rather really designed to assess your level of expertise, and not, how much you've read and memorized and are able to spit out. And I can tell you that with absolute confidence. When I went for my Master Cicerone exam, my study partner had done a lot of more in-depth, granular research on a number of different things. And I think what gave me the edge and what allowed me to pass was the fact that I, beyond having read a lot of things, had, through experience, developed, a perspective and an opinion. And I think, as people are grading these exams, they're graded by industry peers, they're not just looking for, can you spit out common knowledge about beer? They're looking for, what will you be adding to the industry, which I think is fantastic. As I mentioned, I am a fan of the program. Oh, I see someone's having some technical issues. Sorry about that, Monica. I hope you get to watch this later. It's my understanding that it stays online perpetually, so thanks for the note. All right, let's dive into the program. I believe I'm speaking very quickly, so I will slow down. So, level 1, certified beer server. Important disclaimer, back from my working for the Cicerone certification program days, certified beer server, I slipped up right there, is not a Cicerone certification. So in the sense that once you pass your certified beer server, which is the first level, you cannot take on the title of Cicerone. Cicerone starts at the second level. Technicality, but important to note because people will call you out. Oh, they will. So this exam it's really what it sounds like. It's designed for people who serve beer. So the question arises then, well, what does a beer server need to know? Obviously, how to change a keg and reset a fob, how to pour a beer properly. This exam also touches on smart service. Obviously, it has to be done. If you're in the US, the 3-tier system, just the basics that you need to understand. Then, obviously, we talk about, not we anymore, the program touches on the basics of beer. What are the ingredients that go into beer? Just understanding it as a beverage, as a delicious beverage. The process, talks a little bit about tasting technique, and then it really gets into styles. And styles is something that I'm sure many of you have come across. I am not aware of my audience. When I speak, I'm used to having a dialogue and be able to ask the general beer knowledge. So I'm sure many of you are aware of what a style is. But for those of you who aren't, I think it's important to open a little bracket here. So beer styles would be, an example of beer style would be, for example, a stout or a pilsner or an IPA, I'm sure you've heard of. And in the beer world, for better or for worse, we divide beers by styles. Other beverages, for example, if I was to make a parallel wine, obviously is designated by grape and region. So what a wine is to define what's in the bottle. You just need to know what grape is it and where did it come from, and that'll tell you what's in the bottle. With spirits, obviously there are different categories of spirits that have different ingredients in them. The issue arises though that all beers have the same 4 basic ingredients: the water, the malted barley, the hops, and the yeast. They might have them in different variations, and they might have additional ingredients, but the combination stays the same. So the whole idea of a style is to get into the specifics of what type of ingredients are in that particular beer. So for example, with my 4 ingredients, if I'm dealing with a stout, I know that it will have some dark grains in it. I know that it will have probably a British style hop, unless it's an American style stout. And I know that it will be, if it's depending on the type of stout, but let's say a traditional Irish stout, it'll be lower ABV, probably in the 4 to 5 region. So it's an ale. So it's a shorthand way of saying this is what's in the bottle, because to list all those ingredients would be complicated. So as much as people are becoming increasingly aware of style, I still see a lot of confusion, details like the difference between a Belgian style wheat beer and a German style wheat beer, 2 very different styles, but with enough similarities that people often get them confused. Porters versus stouts, all these minutiae. So this is really what the Certified Beer Server exam delves into and makes sure that the people who are taking that exam can untangle all these details. Because once you're at the service level and someone is asking you these questions, or a new beer arrives on tap, if you can just quickly assess what's in the container based on the style description, then you're in business. It's going to make your job a lot easier. So As for the exam itself, the Certified Beer Server is an online exam. It's very quick. It's multiple choice. And the Cicerone Certification Program for that level does offer an online course that you can take. It's called Beer Savvy, and it takes about 8 hours. You can go through it and then write the exam. But you can also study on your own pretty effectively. And here I'm going to open another bracket to talk about another interesting aspect about the Cicerone Certification Program is that they will test you based on standardized materials. So, for example, when we're talking about changing a keg and resetting a fob, the Cicerone Program does not examine you on this is how the Cicerone Program thinks you should do it. They will test you on this is the industry standard for how to do it. So at the Certified Beer Server level, there's 2 documents that you really need to be aware of and to familiarize yourself with. Here they come. I don't know, I'm seeing it backwards. I don't know if you'll see it backwards, but it's the Draft Beer Quality Manual, and this is put out by the Brewers Association, the BA, the American Brewers Association, and I took the time to pay for the paper copy, but this is also available as a free download online at brewersassociation.org. If you Google Draft Beer Quality Manual, U.S. Brewers Association, it'll be the first hit. I believe they're revising it now. This is the 2nd edition. They're reviewing it. But anything that's service, kegs, fobs, at any level of the Cicerone Certification Program is based on these standards. So free download. There you go. The other material, the other document rather that you should absolutely be aware of is this, the BJCP style guidelines. So I went on that bit of a tangent about what a style is and how important styles are when navigating a beer selection and explaining a beer to a customer. So the BJCP is the Beer Judge Certification Program, which I've also studied with. I'm a national level beer judge. And so they are one of the bodies that sets standards of what a beer style should be. So it'll talk about what the aroma should be, what the appearance should be, what the flavor should be, the mouthfeel, the overall impression, the comments, the alcohol content, the color, the bitterness, and then it'll give you a list of examples. So when you're studying, I'm particularly fond of the list of examples because you can go out and taste along as you're reading. And for those of you who are really starting from scratch, I can tell you that this is when I started in beer, the very first thing I did was pick these up. Again, I bothered to get the hard copy, but you can get it as a free download. You can even get it, I have it as an app on my phone. Back in the day, I didn't have apps or phones, so I printed out a copy. But what I would do is whenever I was drinking a beer, I'd look up that style here and read the description as I was tasting and try to wrap my brain around it. And just, you know, through doing that over and over again, I eventually got to the stage where I would taste the beer and write the notes and then compare it. But it's really, if you're massively geeky like me, a fun way to get into beer. So there you go. Those are the 2 standards against which a lot of the knowledge is tested. So that's good to be aware of. I have a few more books, but I'll pull them out for section 2. Because it's time to talk about the Cicerone, the Certified Cicerone exam. So Certified Cicerone exam is level 2. Certified Cicerone, you'll notice that it includes the word Cicerone. So at that stage, you can put that on your LinkedIn and your business card. There's a little seal. Oh, I didn't bring I have a pin, which I could have worn had I been more prepared. So this exam would be equivalent to the sommelier. So it is geared towards a sommelier type position. So someone who is maybe a beverage program manager or someone who's a bar manager, you know, someone who will be supervising, you know, the wait staff and, you know, taking care of the beverage selection and the glassware and that sort of thing. So, so what does this person need to know? Obviously, it goes a little bit deeper into the information that you need to know for the Certified Beer Server. Certified Beer Server is a prerequisite, so it doesn't recap any of that, but it will go in a little bit deeper on those topics, styles, that sort of thing. Also, how to troubleshoot a draft system. So if something goes wrong with the draft, what are the different things you can check to see about making it better. Pairing beer with food, and of course addressing customer complaints. So we're getting a little bit more hardcore here. So this is a live exam. It's 4 hours. There is a written component, which is fill in the blanks. I mentioned certified beer server is multiple choice, so now we're at certified Cicerone. It's fill in the blanks, 3 essays. There is a live presentation component, and then of course a tasting exam. And the tasting exam is pretty fun if you're geeky like me. And it involves 3 sections. So one is a style discrimination section. So this is very interesting, and so of course testing your understanding of styles on a different level, on a flavor level. So what happens is you're given a beer and you're given 2 styles, and you have to determine based on the flavor which of the 2 styles it's brewed in. Then there is an off flavor section. So in this section you're presented a range of beers, and some of them have been spiked to taste like there's been a problem. Either it's been under the light and it's been skunked, or it's gone through dirty lines and it's soured. I am making this up. Those may or may not be the off notes that are on the exam. Those are just 2 examples of off notes. If you want to know the specific off flavors that are covered in the exam, I'm sure that's on the website. And then the last section, which was the section I found really fun, deals with this sort of a customer complaint type scenario. So you're just given a beer, and you're told the customer has sent it back. This is what it's supposed to be. Is it off or not? And if it's off, how can it be fixed? So that's pretty much the way that exam works. And I also should mention glassware is an important component of that exam. So in terms of preparation, I can tell you that on my website, which again is beerology.ca, I have a comprehensive blog post that really explains many different ways in which you can prepare, all of the resources that you can use either online or elsewhere. And I think to this day, if you just Google how to become a certified Cicerone, it'll be among the first hits. In Canada anyway it is. I'll be curious to know if it is in the US as well. So of course, at this stage you're still going to want to deal with your 2 trusted documents, your BJCP style guidelines and your draft quality manual. Other resources that you should be looking at is this fantastic book called Tasting Beer by Randy Mosher, which will also help you out at the first level, but a great read. Then there's this book here, The Brewmaster's Table, which is by Garrett Oliver. And this is really focused on food pairing. And at the time when the Cicerone Certification Program was established, this was pretty much the book about food pairing. And then, of course, without further ado, my book, which is Beerology. And I do recommend it highly. It fills in a lot of the blanks in terms of the food pairing aspect. It's also just a different approach. It's a more flavor-based approach. It's more about understanding what's in front of you, with a little bit less of a focus on history. And I divide the beers, for example, by flavor, and I group them by common flavors rather than, by geographical region or historical context. So I truly believe that, these 2 books in complement, and you'll be in business. You'll be in business. And if food pairing, on a side note, is very of particular interest to you, there is this course that was just created by the Brewers Association, the Beer and Food course on craftbeer.com, and they have a lot of resources again there. The Brewers Association in the US is doing fantastic work. Finally, I wish I had a hard copy, but I don't even know if they exist. There is a fine gentleman in the US who has created guides to prepare for both the first and the second level, and I suspect he's coming out with one for the third level too. And his guides are called the Beer Scholar Guide. So if you Google Beer Scholar Cicerone, he has a workbook for level 1, a workbook for level 2. And as I was researching for this talk today, just to see if there were hard copies available yet, right now they're just downloads, paid downloads, but you know, he's worked hard on making them, so that's fair. I noticed that he's taken the 3rd level exam, so I won't be surprised if he puts out some tools to help people prep for that as well. Whew, I'm gonna have a little sip of water, then we'll dive into level 3. We're almost done. That's a lot of talking. Okay, so level 3 is the Advanced Cicerone exam, and to be honest, this is the level that I can speak to the least. The reason for that being it's new. It was introduced last year for many reasons. I think with the critical mass being reached with the certified Cicerones, there were a lot of people who wanted to take a further certification but weren't quite ready for the Master Cicerone yet. And I think this is an important thing to note, and I will mention it now. There is a huge leap between each exam. The certified beer server, as I mentioned, is a multiple choice. It's online, and I've often had people take the certified beer server online. I've heard from them and they say, oh, well, that was super easy. And then they sign up for the certified Cicerone the next day, not realizing how big of a jump in knowledge is between the two. And again, from certified to advanced, and again, from advanced to master. So all that to say that there were some people who wanted to go a level beyond certified Cicerone, but were struggling with the master. So this intermediary level was introduced. But at the time when I took my master's, that didn't exist, so I didn't have to take that exam in between the two. So, Advanced Cicerone. I haven't even seen the pin yet. I love the pins. It feels good to have your little pin when you pass the exam, so that's one pin I'll never have. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So I think when I think of the Advanced Cicerone, I am thinking of, again, more of a bar manager position, or maybe someone who's in charge of the beverage program for multiple establishments, but beer-focused ones. You know, I think if someone is working in a cocktail establishment or a fine dining restaurant with a beer list, they could probably get away with the certified Cicerone level. But when they're getting into a more specialized establishment and they might be called upon to give some talks or host some dinners or make some more strategic decisions, you know, the Advanced Cicerone might be helpful there. So I really do not advise tackling this exam if you haven't worked in beer for at least 3 years. As I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, the first 2 levels can really be reached through book study and memorization. Once you get to the 3rd level, a more assimilation and sort of processing of the materials is required, and the most straightforward way to achieve that is just through working with beer every day, or brewing it, of course, whether professionally or homebrew. And so this is a full day exam. If you want to know the details of what's involved, you're welcome to go on the website. Again, I haven't taken it, but I'm sure it's multiple essays, multiple tasting exams, and multiple oral exams. So it's a full day, and as I mentioned, it requires that combination of study and experience. And at that stage, I don't really have any further resources for you. I would, again, recommend my book, which is this one, just in terms of starting to shift the way that you look at beer and that you think about beer. Because although my book will have a lot of materials that are similar to other books, the approach is very different, and I guess my opinion and my thoughts come through, and it might lead you to question some of the things that are commonly presented in a certain way, and realize that there's more than one way to approach or present something, and just start getting you to thinking, well, then is it this or that, or do I think it's neither, and where do I want to go from there? And on a side note, I should mention, since this is a Tales site, that I did put some beer cocktails in there, which I was very excited about. So there you go. Yeah, so at this level, though, there's no further books that I can recommend, because you really should read all the books. Just assimilate as much information as you can in terms of the basics. Make sure you look at the syllabus and are reading through and ticking all of those boxes. I recommend as much as possible try to take practical classes. I know that my weak spot when I took my Master Cicerone was the whole draft aspect of it. And I went down to the US and I took a course where we installed a draft system from scratch and then took it all apart again. And then I went to breweries and asked them if I could clean their draft systems. I went to bars and really tried to get that hands-on experience as much as possible. So that is my advice to you. On to the last level, the Master Cicerone. So for the Master Cicerone, the Cicerone certification program doesn't quite provide a specific job description in the same way as it does for the certified beer server or the certified Cicerone. And what I would say is that, this is a certification that I would recommend for anyone who's looking to move into a consultancy, a consultant position, which is, what my goal is and what I'm doing with Beerology. So the pass rate for this exam is hovering around 10%. So you really have to be determined. I, for myself, found the exam to be grueling, but I also thought it was super fun. The way they ask questions really makes you sort of stop and think and tap into what you know and tap into your experience. So all this to say, again, I would not recommend tackling this exam if you haven't worked actively in beer, probably full-time, I would say, for at least 3 years. So that exam, it might have changed format a little bit since I took it, but it's still a 2-day exam. When I took the exam, there was in the morning 3 hours of essay writing, half-hour oral exam, a tasting exam, lunch, then the same thing that afternoon, and then the same thing the next day. And the syllabus is online. It's a detailed list of everything you need to know, but I think it would be fair to say that nothing is off limits for the Master Cicerone exam. I was certainly tested on things that were not in the curriculum, and that was considered to be perfectly fair, because I guess you're supposed to have mastered the service aspect of beer. So that's pretty much the program, and so the question arises, well, is it worth it to take this certification? And as far as I'm concerned, for the first level, absolutely yes. What I am seeing in the beer community, or rather in the beverage establishment community, pubs, gastropubs, beer-focused restaurants, etc., is increasingly the certified beer server is just being considered a prerequisite for employment as a server in those establishments. It's a really quick way to just ensure that whoever you are bringing in is qualified. You can also, of course, bring people in and then put them through the program. As I'm sure you all know, it's much easier to hire someone who is personable and teach them about beer than hire someone who, has incredible amount of knowledge and teach them to be personable. So you have to ride that line, find someone who fits for you. But the certified beer server, I think, is just great. It's a good way, as I mentioned, to make sure that your staff knows what they're doing. And it's a great way to show your customers that you're serious, especially if you're just bringing in a beer program for the first time, or maybe, you just had one beer previously and now you want to expand into a number of craft beers. If your servers are certified beer server certified, that's a mouthful. You know, you can put the certificates up on the wall, you can advertise that in some way, and anyone who's a beer geek will know exactly what that means. They'll know you're taking it seriously, and it might be an additional reason for them to trust your establishment over another. And you know, with a mixed crowd, with some beer geeks and some cocktail folk and some omnibibulous people like me, you know, you might draw in more of a crowd there. So beyond that, I think with the other 3 levels, if you have a serious beer program, or you're serious about your beer program, and particularly if you have a draft, then you know you should have one person at your bar who's at the certified Cicerone level. Again, it's not a class, so it's not a question of, you know, you have to, whoever's in that position should, you know, take 2 weeks off and take a class. If they're already in that position, they will be acquiring all of the knowledge and skill that they need, and it's just a nice goal to set. And for me, one of the things I really enjoyed working towards the Master Cicerone is it was a way to shape my studies, because I wanted to learn more about beer, and the world of beer is vast. There is so much to learn. So for me, just having that syllabus, that checklist, was a great way to make sure that I was gaining knowledge that was well-rounded and not just following my specific interest, which I also followed, of course, with a little bit more zeal. Hi, Frank. Oh, great. You're taking the certified beer server. Nice. Great to hear. Great to hear. So yes, as I was saying, at least one person in the bar at the certified Cicerone level would be great. So to recap, the resources that you'll need, very important at all levels. Actually, Frank, you'll probably be familiar with these. The BA Draft Quality Manual, important at all levels. BJCP Style Guidelines, important again at all levels. Those 2 are both free downloads that are available online. Moving forward, the Beer and Food course, craftbeer.com. This, I would say, is getting from certified Cicerone and above. And in my experience, the 2 things that people struggle with going from certified and beyond are food pairing and the off-flavor identification. So for food pairing, this is a great resource. The Brewmaster's Table by Garrett Oliver is a great resource. Tasting Beer by Randy Mosher. And my book again, Beerology, where I did really try to tackle the food pairing conundrum. The other thing I just mentioned, of course, which some people struggle with, again, from the certified Cicerone level and above, so not at the certified beer server level, is off flavor identification. So that deals with beyond knowing intellectually when a beer is off, understanding what that flavor tastes like. So in beer, during the process, there are many little things that can go awry that will impact its flavor and its aroma. And as well in storage and service, there are a lot of things that can go awry that even though it was perfectly brewed when it left the brewery, if it's not stored and served properly, it can taste funky. And I use the term funky politely. It can taste pretty gross sometimes. So off-flavor detection is part of the Certified Advanced and Master Cicerone exam. And, oh, you're welcome, Erica. Thanks for tuning in. At those levels, you really need to be able to tell by tasting, you know, what off flavor is this, and be able to identify those off flavors. So that is not something you can pick up in a book. It's not something you can pick up online. And it's certainly not something that you'll pick up as you go, unless you know someone, you have a close friend or a colleague who is familiar with those off flavors. Most of the time, you'll just see see that there's something wrong with the beer, have to guesstimate what it is based on literature. So I saw a little question go by a second ago about the reading list, and just wanted to reiterate that if you Google how to become a certified Cicerone, you'll get to a blog post on my website where I detail it all very clearly. Hold on, I had another question here. Beer history. Yeah, so any books, resources that you can recommend for that at the Certified Cicerone? Yeah, so for those, I would say that you definitely want to read the Randy Mosher, The Tasting Beer, and the BJCP style guidelines will also give you some history there. So with those two, I think you'll be okay at the Certified Cicerone level. Of course, if history is something that fascinates you, there's a whole bunch of, whole bunch of people doing in-depth research on history. And the interesting thing about beer, and this is how I conclude that blog post that I was just talking about, is, when it comes to beer, the more you learn, the less you know. Because beer history, and it's interesting because the more I talk to cocktail people, the more I see this is just an alcoholic beverage wide situation, not very well documented necessarily. I think a lot of people were enjoying making and drinking these beverages, but not necessarily documenting it so well. There's a lot of misinformation that's been around, so you can of course go into it very deep. But these resources that I've outlined and that are on that blog post should really set you up very comfortably for the Certified Cicerone exam. So I was talking about off flavors, and I wanted to mention two things. One, the Cicerone certification program does have a little kit for the Certified Cicerone level that you can just purchase. It's powder that you put in your beer and it'll mimic those off flavors, and it comes with a little webinar. So that's something that's handy. You can get a couple of friends together, taste some really gross beers, and learn a thing or two. There are companies that make off flavor spikes that you can also purchase for a larger group. They're Flavor Active, which is in the UK, Aroxa, which is in the UK, and Siebel, which is in the US. Those can be quite cost prohibitive, which is why the Cicerone program has created the little kit for the Certified Cicerone level. But for those of you who are working towards advanced or master, you'll probably want to get into a larger spectrum of off flavors, which you'll have to find through those three companies, which I'll reiterate: Siebel, Flavor Active, and Aroxa. Otherwise, if you're in Canada, I do offer off flavor tasting classes. It's something I noticed 5 years ago didn't exist, and I find off flavors fascinating. Again, the flavors in beer, where they come from, through process and service, is really the sort of the focus of all of my work. So it was a natural thing to do, and I have pitched a seminar to Tales of the Cocktail for off flavors. So we'll see if that happens. Then maybe I'll be offering an off flavor class in New Orleans as well. It's really fascinating. I love off flavors. Learning about them is both empowering, because when you're at a bar and something doesn't taste right, instead of just sheepishly coming to the bar and saying, I'm pretty sure this isn't right, you can say, hello, this is this off flavor. It's not your fault. It probably occurred at the brewery, or there might be an issue with your, are you storing your beers in the light? This is clearly skunked. It's empowering. I find it fun, and I don't know, it's useful information. So off flavors, I'm just looking at my notes here. If you come to Canada, welcome to join my class. I think that's all I was going to say. Let me just see if I can scroll through questions, see if I missed anything here. Hello, the first book. Yes, the reading list. And all of my recommendations for the Certified Cicerone level can be found on my website. Just Google how to become a Certified Cicerone, and maybe I'll see if I can post a link to that. That's what I'll do. I'll see if I can post a link to that under this talk for everyone to look at. The history essay I tackled. Oh no, you had my book and someone borrowed it and never brought it back. Well, you have many options to pick up your own copy. I'm delighted that it was deemed stealable. But it was out of print over the holidays, sadly, but I think it's back now. And if you go to my website, I have a link for IndieBound, so you can see which of your local independent bookstores carry it. If not, of course, it's widely available online, Amazon and Indigo, etc. So, am I going to be doing any work with Neil and his new consulting company? It's possible. If he needs help, I would be absolutely happy to give him a hand. We did discuss his project before he dove in, and I think it sounds great. His specialization is different from mine, so I could absolutely see that we might end up working together on that. And I think that's another really cool thing, just looking at the spectrum of Master Cicerones that are out there. Almost all of whom I've had the pleasure of meeting. I think there's 2 I haven't met yet. We all have a very different focus and passion in the world of beer, and it's just so fun to get together and geek out about different aspects of beer and what moves us. So hold on, I have another note. Let's see what that question was. Should we trust what the brands are saying? If a representative comes and makes a presentation, that's a pretty sweeping question. That depends. I would say trust and verify. You know, at the end of the day, there are many different companies giving presentations. I'm pretty sure most of them have try to make the information as accurate as possible. Again, as I mentioned earlier, beer is so poorly documented. If the person putting together the training is not particularly knowledgeable and is looking for information and resources online, they might inadvertently put in information that is not accurate, or they might, oversimplify. So, my advice would be, trust and verify. And that's my advice for life, I think, at the end of the day. I'm not a human being who ever will take anything, for granted. If someone tells me something, I'll, think about if it makes sense or not, and then research it. But yeah, again, many different breweries. I can't make a sweeping statement for all of them. Let's see, any advice on developing sensory skills? Yes. Oh, this is a long question. Any advice on developing sensory skills? Obviously, it's great to drink with someone who is very vivid and specific, and that helps, but it's difficult to find systematic approach like the deductive approach with wine. So there's 2 things that I will mention here. One, I talked about at the beginning, so I'll just touch on it briefly, and you can always, I think you can rewind this video. But how I taught myself how to taste, because back in the day when I decided to dive into beer, there were no beer classes. There were 0 beer classes. I actually ended up taking a wine tasting class. I did my WSET intermediate to hone my palate, because there were no beer classes. But what I ended up doing is I took this BJCP guidelines, I downloaded them, now I've got them downloaded to my phone. I printed them out. These are free online. And what I would do is when I tasted a beer, I would look up what the style was. For example, here I've got the Belgian Double. So I would either seek out one of the Belgian Doubles listed below, or if I was in a bar drinking a Belgian Double, I would pull this out and, nose the beer, read through the aroma description, the appearance, the flavor, and just try to make those connections. Beyond that, though, I would say a helpful resource is on my website, again, free download. I have a beer tasting sheet that I created. If you go to my website, beerology.ca, how to taste beer, it's called the beer evaluation sheet. It's a free download. If you would like, it's also en français at beerology.ca/French. And so that, actually, I can show you, it's also in my book. I was wishing that I had it downloaded, but I had it included in here. So this tasting sheet is really designed to take you through all of the different considerations, and it shares standard vocabulary. So you can sort of use it as a checklist to help guide you. Beyond that, if you would like to hone your palate and you have a few friends, which I'm hoping you have, my book also has a big section called Diving In, which has all tasting activities, guided activities that you can use to hone your palate. And when I was conceiving of these activities and testing them, I brought together a group of my friends who were not beer people at all, who had zero beer knowledge. And we ran through them, and they really did find that they were able to follow, and that these activities were incredibly helpful. So those are in the Diving In section of my book, which is Beerology. Again, really the focus of my book when compared to the other resources out there is it's really practical. It's meant to encourage people to explore what's in front of them and to discover it. So I hope those resources are helpful to you. All right. I think that was everything. So how are we doing for time? Ooh, the hour is done. I can't believe I just spoke for an hour. Matthias, oh, well, it was my pleasure. I hope you find this helpful. It was fun to do. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm just so excited that people in the cocktail community are interested in craft beer, and that the world in general is more and more interested in craft beer, because when I first discovered it, it really looked like a niche interest. And I remember back in the day, in my teens, thinking, you know, when I retire, I'm going to write a book about craft beer and tell everyone about this wonderful beverage that no one is, you know, really taking the time to discover. And it's just so amazing to see that it's happened on its own. So once again, my name is Mirella Amato, and I am coming to you live from Toronto. Signing out now. If you want to find out more about my work, or if you want to contact me at all, I'm at beerology.ca. Have a great day, everyone.